renovated, I think 86. And there was the front part of 86 is, sorry, it is flagstone. It's got some,
Goshen, maybe? It's a big.
it's smaller slate type stones. And there's the Wisconsin gardener, Marty McGowan, his client is the person, I think for both 86 and 88. And they were planning on doing some utility work that's going to require disrupting the sidewalk in that area. So there was already a plan afoot to do some work in that sidewalk. What I have talked to Marty and our contractor about is essentially, because we have half of that block is that slate stone and the other half is brick, it would be a really nice way to sort of build a model, restore that area, and have it as an example for everyone in the neighborhood during the summer season to be able to take a look at, provide comments back to the DPW, and to come back in other sessions. We could have some more outreach sessions through the summer to be able to go out, do field visits, and look at some other things out there. You know, as much as we are embracive of the historic nature of things, when we get out and look at the minutia and the details out there, there's lots of stuff that is not historic at all. It's there's concrete, there's asphalt, there's different things out there that we intend to remove and to replace with historic materials. So some of the offsetting of materials that we've been able to recover from Lower Main Street or Straight Wharf and other projects that we've been able to stockpile over the years, and with this most recent construction efforts, the downtown, we're now going to be able to bring those up and restore areas that have long since not had historic materials in. So that's an important feature I wanted to share tonight as well. There's been, our intent right now is to start with sidewalks. Do the sidewalks, get those accessible, and get those completed. And we have a sidewalk program that starts at the waterfront and works out of town, sort of parallel from South Water up to Federal, to Center, and working our way out. And I think the big challenge is, if we were to follow along with the schedule that we currently have at the capacity that our contractor is able to bring to bear, by the time we get to Upper Main Street, I'd be ready for retirement, I think. So, and Upper Main Street, frankly, it's a showpiece. It's shameful to me that we have multi-million-dollar homes that are kept up in pristine condition, and yet we have this really atrocious right-of-way. Something that we really need to improve the surface of for safety and accessibility. And I think we can do that with the exact materials that are there. So it's my goal to sort of start there while we're simultaneously working from both ends and start to come together probably down somewhere in the Center Street area when we're all said and done. So with that said, you know, I think one of the points made at one of the earlier meetings was, what's the rush, right? And that was the point, I guess, was if we're not in a rush, we're trying to do this methodically. We're trying to think it through and seek input from people who are interested in providing feedback to us, providing input before we put a shovel in the ground. And we've had some really good participation so far. Particularly the last meeting we had at the Hadwin House, well attended. I know the Chairman Pohl came in, and Michael, I met you the first time there. So we're definitely getting some good input. I want to make sure people understand that's going to continue. We're going to continue to listen and take baby steps to achieve what I think everyone feels is very important, specifically in the sidewalk restoration projects. Sidewalks first, and then cobblestones. And everyone's very interested in what happens with the cobblestones, as is myself. Cobblestones are a bit unique. There hasn't been a restoration on the scale that we're talking about, not just in Upper Main Street, but the entire core. Hasn't been a restoration effort in a very, very long time. I believe someone told me maybe India Street might have been the last one.
No, I think I'm not sure whether the crossing of Main Street and South Water and Washington, when it was repaired due to the moving of heavy electric company items.
Gotcha. Okay, so I guess the point is that there's a lot of heavy equipment and expected continued heavy traffic through into the future. You know, we're concerned about establishing a crowned finished cobblestone roadway, and there's been some debate on what the foundation surfaces or materials should be. I would say we're very interested in having a permanent installation that's going to hold up. And I'm very interested in understanding different types of cross sections that would be appropriate. So the plan is to build test sections. The plan would be to build at least two test sections, full width cobblestone roads with different types of foundations out at the DPW facility, so that we're going to be able to subject that area to heavy truck traffic from the DPW facility on a regular basis, and we're going to watch it, and we're going to see how it performs, and we're going to report back, and people will be able to come out and see it under construction. We'll document that, see it, touch it, and be able to watch it while it is aging and performing. And based on those results, come back and make a recommendation on how to proceed, and we can go from there. So we're not talking about having something that's just pushed out there, pushed down to everyone's throat, and we're going to plow forward with this magical idea. This is very important to me and to a lot of you, which is why we're all here to talk about it. So we want to approach this in a way that makes sense and that we can actually stand behind and say, it worked here. We believe we can use the same or similar techniques to get the same result. Again, lifting the old materials, improving the foundation, and putting the same materials back. Public and private utilities are all being discussed. We have a lot more sensitivity where we are widening along the waterfront. There's a lot more disruption going on when it comes to public and private utilities. Again, in Upper Main Street, pretty much where things are largely where they're going to stay, or expected to be to stay. The exceptions we've been talking about with homeowners is if there's a decorative street lamp, for instance, that has historically been hit from delivery vehicles or turning construction vehicles, etc. We would like to know about it. Give us some feedback. Let us know. Is that something that is problematic for you? You'd like to see it relocated. We've talked to a number of people about the potential for planting trees, not just making sure that the trees are kept not damaged. But we wanna make sure that if there are trees to be planted, if there's areas that historically have had trees, can we reintroduce trees to those areas to continue to maintain the beautiful canopy? So we're looking into that. I would say there's a couple spots right at 100 and across the street to 100 that we are contemplating a change. So we'll be talking lots about that. I didn't bring a picture of that specifically with me, but 100 is opposite Pleasant Street from the Hadwin House. And it's killing me that I forget the person's name.
Are you
Macy?
talking about Gardner Street?
Nope. Upper
The
Main,
Macy's? The
Is that
Macy
Main?
house?
Upper Main 100.
The Macy house?
The Mall House?
Across the street.
So safe saying Macy, they're all Macy's.
On the corner.
100 is the Mall House.
The Hadwin house?
No, it's
It's across from,
No, 3 bricks are opposite the Hadwin house.
it's just up the street, it's Mark Coffey.
The other side of Pleasant Street.
It's not the one on the
Hadwin
corner.
is even further.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
I'm sorry, I misspoke, it's 98.
98.
98, yeah.
So it is the Coffin House, 1836.
98,
Yeah, Taylor.
Taylor, thank you, the Taylor brothers. So I've met with the Taylor brothers on numerous occasions, and so we've talked about the possibilities out there. And what I can tell you is there's some ADA concerns as far as accessibility. If you know that area, you have 2 sidewalks that approach the house, and then there's a sloped slab stone approach to the landing directly at the bottom of their stairs. So the stairs are settling, the landing has settled, and there's sort of this really strange grade change in front of the landing, between the landing and the sort of the gutter line of the street. I'm told the Barrett bus folks cleared that area off years ago to be able to pull the bus over for tours. So it's a challenge because the drains off the house extend right through the sidewalk there, and they're these wonderfully carved stones, and so they don't meet ADA accessibility requirements for wheelchairs. So we're looking at an alternative to keep the historic. There's a jog out just past 98 in front of 100, which I think is being restored right now. So in that area, we're contemplating at the corner, Pleasant Street itself, very narrow. It's about 17 and a half feet right at the corner. Then you have curbs both sides and narrow sidewalks. We've had great success downtown flushing up sidewalks. The flushing of the sidewalks essentially allows pedestrians and vehicles to utilize the same space safely when we have that respect that we do here on the island, where people stop when someone's at or near a crosswalk, and then once they're through, they pull through with their truck and trailer or regular passenger vehicle. So what we're looking to do is to, rather than fight it, to take a look at those intersections to see if shortening up the reveal on the curb as we get through those crosswalk locations to essentially allow vehicles to utilize not just the full width of the lane, but as they come through the corner, when it's not occupied by a pedestrian, be able to safely come over the corner that they currently come over, but they have to come up over a 5 or 6 inch curb. So you can see unsuccessful attempts in the past to erect some sort of ironwork in the stonework there to keep people from coming over that curb line. You've seen the fire alarm stand, which is now removed because it's been hit so many times. It's been taken out. The the trees on that corner have been tagged from trying to take the tight corner, and also, I believe there's also a decorative light stand in there that's continuously hit. So those are the sort of things that we kick through and start to really look at when we talk about improvements, right? I'm excited that Cormac's here representing his last few weeks with the Land Council. We co-sponsored a project this past fall with students from WPI to conduct a tree inventory of the downtown. It's focused on Main Street first, and it was a very successful project, one that I'm excited to continue to build upon. And I think that's another, really, it's a feather in the town's cap to be able to inventory and raise the appreciation level of the resource that we have here. It also is fantastic documentation in a really modern format that's going to be easy to share with others, to bring some of the pretty amazing history that some of these trees have to bear to visitors and even for people here who are just interested in the history. So that's an exciting piece for me too, because I'm learning along the way. It's had some interesting conversations with some owners through the years, particularly one I remember on Orange Street, where I was really hard pressed to believe that this house predated the tree that I was standing next to that I couldn't possibly get my arms around. And he had documentation that showed that the house certainly predated the house by nearly 80 years. So he was dealing with tree roots over a foot that were disruptive to his foundation. So it's really an interesting dynamic between the houses and the trees that are nearby. And again, we're going to be dealing with the countless root systems as well as utilities and that sort of thing on Upper Main Street. And we have already taken steps to initiate discussions with the tree warden. Obviously, we have an arborist on staff, but we've encountered numerous tree issues and tree roots with the sidewalk projects that we've already undertaken, even along the waterfront. And I was happy to be able to save the 2 trees in front of the old Macy warehouse when, frankly, people approached me and said, we ought to take them down. They don't have, they're not a really specimen quality tree. And so I bring it up because that was a decision that it really did come down to me saying, no, we're going to find a way to keep the trees and work around them and bring the sidewalk widening project. And I think with all the various interests in mind, being able to balance all of that to provide a project that achieves so many different goals from so many different perspectives, I think that's a real challenge. It really is it's a major challenge, and I think that is, I won't say it's easier or more difficult for Upper Main Street. It's just, it's another challenging project that we're all working together to get what we feel is the most important thing, sharing those ideas and concerns and the like. We talked briefly about 98 crosswalk consolidations that we're looking at. There's a number of, I'll say, non-standard crosswalks that come across Upper Main Street. I think, if I remember correctly, in like 6 locations. That's okay. Some are, and they're all different, that's fine too. But there's no accessibility concerns on either. There's no ramp systems currently If there is a curb line where they approach, there's really no way for us to put in handicap accessible ramps at those locations of the existing landings. The one in front of 98, in fact, comes across on a real angle and then was extended at some point from the gutter line up to the crosswalk on that side. So there's also on-street parking, and we want to try to maintain the on-street parking to the capacity that exists out there today. And so there's a combination of things going on here. One, about providing safe and smooth constructed crosswalks at areas that need them, which is at the major intersections, and balancing that with these areas that have had these installations for a long time. So the thought process was that if we consolidated the 6 into 2, one at Pleasant Street and one down at Winter Street, the space that we would, so you're playing with where the 6 currently lie, even though they're not in compliance with the ADA code. Technically, you're not supposed to park on any of those. So if we consolidate from 6 to 2, you're essentially gaining some parking space. That would be offset with the change that we're proposing at 98, which is the widening at Pleasant Street in front of 98, the Coffin House, to basically eliminate the parking that's right near the intersection of Pleasant Street. And we can get into details. No decisions are being made anytime soon here. This is really a information gathering session. I just want to bring some of the ideas that we're kicking around that have been shared in the first 2 sessions for the folks that are brand new. And the crosswalk specifically for the Pleasant Street location is envisioned to be in front of the Hadwin House, directly across. It's essentially connecting the 2 doorways to those houses. It's not exactly on the corner of Pleasant Street, but it's just down a hair. And if you look at the landings for both, there's adequate room to be able to put in the appropriate ramp systems to land them. They can't land where they currently do, either in sidewalks, or not sidewalks, into driveways. There's a number of them that go into driveways, and that's not allowed any longer. So, talked a little bit about on-street parking. We're going to try to maintain that and
Rob,
keep what we
excuse
have.
me, I'm gonna have to leave in 10 minutes.
Sure.
And I really wanted you to address the fact that from Pleasant Street to Monument Square, the cobbles are and have been for quite some time in really dangerous condition. And whatever long-term plans you have for that, we need an immediate interim fix for it. And, you know, it's lovely to hear about the long, slow plans for the sidewalks, but the roadway is really dangerous. And what are we going to do?
So ultimately, what's driving there's 2 areas that are really in disrepair when it comes to the cobbles in the upper Rain Street area. That one area you just mentioned, and there's another one down outside of this area, down more towards the bank. And those 2 areas are constant maintenance for us. They don't drain. That is the #1 problem. They don't drain. The water ponds there, the foundation for the stones liquefies, and with the truck traffic or even just turning vehicles trying to avoid those areas, they are loosening the stones, or that whole area is continuing to degrade. So
Well, I was told well over a year ago, that something was going to be done between Pleasant Street and Monument Square, and nothing has been done, absolutely nothing, and it's very dangerous.
So again, the plan is to drain that area, and the concepts that we're playing with right now include, again, reprofiling the road so that we have a crowned roadway system that brings the water to the gutters, and then it's flowing down. Right now, the low point of the project is Winter Street. And Winter Street has two infiltrator basins at the top, right at Main Street, that don't infiltrate. They're non-functioning. So the plan right now, in the short term, is to connect the two and to run them down Winter Street to connect them to the actual drain system that exists over on Liberty.
But what about when you come out of Pleasant Street, right now, today, tonight? What are you going to do about it, and is it going to happen in our lifetime?
Yeah, it's definitely happening. I can't speak to our lifetime, but I can speak to schedule-wise. You know, we're conducting information sessions to get feedback so that when the construction, for the complete reconstruction of that area happens, it happens appropriately. In the short term, we continue to maintain it, which means fill it with stone dust, make adjustments. We have, that's either done in-house with DPW staff, or we have a contractor that helps us do periodic, small cobblestone repairs.
But there are loose cobblestones in the street. I pick them up and put them over against the curb. But there are loose cobblestones lying around there, and they have been for a year and a half. You just have to have something done immediately.
Sure. Yeah, and I think the problem is that people aren't seeing it when the repair occurs. It's reoccurring because the water ponds and has nowhere to go. So it's something that is maintained, and it's maintained on a fairly regular basis. So I think it's you know, I can tell you that we do go in and repair those areas.
Well, there's two deep holes when you go right there. I think that's what Francis is talking
Sure.
about. Are they being repaired this winter?
They are, yes.
Okay, that's what we want to know.
Yeah.
In terms of an ultimate reconstruction, do you have an anticipated start date?
So the model for 86, 88, the sidewalk piece there, the intent is to have that completed before summer.
And in terms of the cobblestone?
Yeah, the cobblestones is down the road. That's gonna take, the DPW is planning to construct these test sections that will be in place. It's gonna take some time to construct to begin with, and then will be in place for some time to be able to test, to see what the various foundations allow, you know, how they hold up under truck traffic. So, you know, that's gonna have to be determined how long that they are able to, you know, be in service to get good information to make a determination whether or not, you know, compare one foundation versus another.
And not tangentially related, but is Monuments area considered a conventional rotary?
Next question.
Never has been.
I've never seen anything like it.
Okay.
I think that it is important for you to do what you're going to do with the test sections. I think there's little point in going in and throwing in some repair that isn't going to work, that's going to come out right away. I think your test section sounds like a very good thing. One of the things that we had discussed was, what about the limit to the weight of trucks going up Main Street? We used to have, and the sign may still be there, we used to have a weight limit going up York Street from Union, going up to Orange and then up to Pleasant.
Sure.
So that.
My understanding from the police chief is weight limits are not legal, and probably why it was there and then it's no longer there.
Well, it was there for years. I don't know whether it's legal or not. I'd perhaps like to see where it's written down that it's not legal, because there in lots of places, not only in Nantucket, but on the Cape, is the weight limit.
Well, weight limits are a standard for bridges that
Right.
are either substandard or are in disrepair. But for streets, that's something I will certainly ask the police chief to weigh in on.
Or town council, perhaps.
Yeah, maybe
You know,
more
maybe-
than the
Maybe
chief
it's
of police.
necessary to get a waiver, because I can tell you there are sometimes, very heavy vehicles on Main Street that literally shake our house.
Sure.
And we're wondering if the house is gonna collapse.
There's nothing that you can't approach from some other road to save you Main Street. And as far as the historic preservation of Nantucket, when you put Nantucket out for the main people on the mainland, and the first thing they say is Nantucket with elm trees and cobblestone streets. And this becomes our calling card, and we are a tourist place.
Sure.
It's our top thing is tourism. And if we destroy all the historic places that they come to see, they're not going to come to see it. Because it's, at least that section of the old historic district, I think is very important. And I think you're looking at the trees is important. Dale, I think, has maintained these trees fantastically over the years. Just, I don't know whether you were here or not, but what was it, 2 years ago, the 8 Atlantic Ave? This little old house, just up at the beginning of Surfside Road where it's Atlantic Ave. It's on the left-hand side going out of town. He wanted to rebuild it a little bit because otherwise it was going to fall down. So, with great concern, we gave him permission with the fact that Dale talked to him about the trees, and we were afraid it was going to not work. He finished the job. It's a big tree, it's a big elm tree, and the elm tree has been very successfully maintained, dug around, and cared for. So it is available to do that rather than cut big roots, because we can't lose the elm tree. We're the biggest supply of elm trees in the country. There's no other place that has as many elm trees
Sure.
that we do.
No, and I think most people respect the fact that we want to maintain the trees and certainly the canopy throughout. And not just that, but when we look to plant, not just looking at that monoculture that is so iconic here, but also protecting ourselves from a complete defoliation by planting additional species for that diversity.
Right. So I think the repair and stuff that you are contemplating is important. That I guess that you decide what's the best repair that will hold up during during the summer, say, in the heat on the roads of where those cobblestones are.
Well, I recognize first and foremost that we have sort of a very limited time to do this work. I don't want to go back and I have one bite at the apple. I go in and do it. I really don't want to go back and have to touch it
Have
again.
applesauce.
Unless it's a maintenance effort. But to go in and to do it and have it withstand years and years of abuse is the goal, because we have so much to do, because it hasn't been done in a very long time. So our goal is to find, not to build it so it's so expensive or so impossible to go in and do any kind of repairs to. If we have to go in, which we will eventually, to go in to do utilities, whether it's public or private utilities, digging these areas back up to either maintain or update their existing infrastructure. For instance, concrete slab, with foundation work on top of it, and then cobblestones would require an exorbitant effort after the fact, not to mention during the fact of construction, but after the fact, having to come in to clear and cut and remove, and then to go fill it all back in and repair it. Yes, it would be sort of that bulletproof surface, and you could really build and drive anything over it, but at what cost? And what long-term cost? So those are the things we really need to think about and balance.
One of the questions that came up is, the road, as far as I know, seeing it down at the crossroads at the Pacific Club, does not have an impermeable surface underneath it. It is clay and stone dust and all that stuff that the cobblestones were then set in, so that they have flexibility as you drive over them without necessarily popping the stones out. And one concern was, if you put an impervious foundation down underneath, and then you put the stone dust and that stuff, and then you set the cobblestones, that at different times of the year, hot summer, the impervious layer may get soft, it may not move, but if a truck or a car comes over it and it's heavy enough to impress the cobblestone down, is it going to not go down and stay where it is? Are they going to take more weight and damage than with a less impervious material underneath them?
I hear you loud and clear, and we have the same concerns. If we were to go with a proposed impervious surface, such as asphalt, as it has been presented. As a quick aside, because I love to joke around, when I first showed up here, the rumor that passed very quickly was, this is the guy who's planning to pave Main Street.
Right.
That was the the joke on me as the new guy, right?
I heard that.
So it was quite ironic when we first talked about improving Main Street cobblestones. And I said, well, I hate to say it, but a really good surface would be to essentially build a conventional road under and then cover it with the appropriate materials above the asphalt to then set the cobbles in. And boy, of course, that's why we're all here tonight. And in addition to many other things. But that said, Diane, I think it brings up a great point. One, if we were to introduce any level of impervious surface under the stones and the foundation for the stones, which is definitely one of the test cases that we'll test. The gutter lines are something that we'll definitely look to address to sort of to have a break between the end of the asphalt and the gutter line underneath, to allow some continued penetration of pervious rainwater,
Right,
pervious
'cause-
surface that allows rainwater to penetrate through.
Because if you have impervious and the trees there, and an elm tree sucks up a lot of water, you have to keep that in mind as to
Sure.
how they're gonna get water.
Well, and it is something that is definitely not lost on us, and we talked extensively at our second meeting about trees and the concerns that we will have building around them, protecting existing roots where we can, probably having to trim some roots in other areas. I mean, some you can see where sort of like the plates dividing, where they've actually, the tree roots have come up and separated some of the slab stuff. So there's a lot of sensitivity. Someone asked me, can I see the construction drawings? And I had to laugh. I said, this is a complete 100% custom job. We could not possibly repeat this on a piece of paper. So I think people start to understand it when they take a walk and they look at what this stuff is, and then really take a look and compare it against some of the old photographs, where when it was new or newer, and they can see that little or none of it has been disrupted yet by tree roots. Little or none of it has seen any real heavy loads driven over it.
Or cars.
Or cars. So, yeah.
I have a question, is there any thought to, resetting the curbstones, giving the trees a little extra breathing room?
Yes, so what we have contemplated is, for instance, in that same stretch up at 98, and now I am talking directly to some concrete that's been filled in. And you'll see that there's been some lost elm trees in those areas. There's some new replants in some of those areas. It's a great spot to look at because, of course, it's right next to the Three Bricks, right across from, not quite across, but almost across from the Hasman House. And it sticks out because it's unique. There's nothing else like it. There's nothing else I've seen like it in town. And it was great because I presented it, and Ray's not here to defend himself, but Ray was gracious enough to attend our second meeting. And I said, we did a field walk, so a whole bunch of us, about this size group, walked up and down the street and looked at different aspects of it. We ended up in that area, and I looked at everyone and said, here, if we were to bring the curb line out to meet that outer edge of the curve, it gives us plantable green space to enrich the root systems of the trees and lets them have a little bit more room to grow. And Ray said, I don't have a quote, but that's a great idea. Let's do something like that. Those rounded areas, there's nothing like that in town, and I said, that's exactly why I'm bringing it up, Ray, because someone's gonna say that's the only place that they exist, so we can't possibly touch them. So, again, sometimes we need to really balance the goals. And I think that's one of the reasons why having these sessions make a lot of sense, because, again, if no one's married to those features, and they do believe that the same goals are met with reset of historical materials, but also allowing for the continued growth of the beautiful canopy, then we're making progress.
Right, is it absolutely necessary to have the sidewalks absolutely flat?
Yes,
Why?
it's the federal law under the
I
Disabilities
don't care.
Act.
Nantucket,
But
get
absolutely
away
flat
from
is
a-
not,
from a
it's not
federal-
flat. It does have,
It has
there's a
slight
pitch.
pitch to drain.
Slight
I
pitch.
understand the pitch, but
Sure.
what we have thought of, because the other question of what the HDC gets to say to you, has not come up tonight, is that if you could mound in some of the places with the bricks, so you didn't have a stoppage of material to come up and cover, you don't have to make it so, what is the description, ladies in, steel-tipped shoes can walk comfortably, because they can fall down anywhere. But,
To your point though, what I would say is, it's very likely that most of our project area is going to lift, is going to be raised up. The sidewalks right now, most of them are mounded up around tree roots to a
Right.
substantial degree. Some cases like a whole foot up out of the ground.
It's like
Right.
a roller coaster.
And so what we're trying to do is recognize that we're not gonna lower the trees, and we're not going to try to cut and cut into those trees to be able to lower the sidewalks back where they were. We're respecting that they need some space, and in most of those cases, even along the Three Bricks, we're fortunate enough that the entrances in are steps up and up and up. And so we have the ability within the right-of-way out front to raise those features and still be able to not affect the entrances.
what about like downtown across, or as you go into the Catholic Church, they have the tree and the grate over it, so you're aware that there's unevenness in there, and perhaps in the places where there's the worst lifting of, you said like a foot, if that area was given to the tree root rather than trying to hide it, but just go around it. And people would be aware those grates are small enough that you would have a hard time having a dog foot go through or whatever. But
So you're talking about introducing new material, a grate?
there is some already, which was down there. You'll see it. I think it's on Federal Street in front of the Catholic Church.
Sure.
That I think you can introduce new material if you are
Write that down.
I'm writing it down.
following what material is been on Main Street. We have had wrought iron fences. We have wrought iron fences. So if you take the wrought iron fence and put it around your tree, do that. Make a
Sure.
2-foot high wrought iron fence around the tree.
Most of the trees you see with tree grates, bear with me, are basically they're sort of protective for the pedestrians to keep the pedestrians, make them aware
Right.
there's a tree there or a vehicle. Let's not hit the thing, it's to sort of cap off and protect those newly planted trees. And unfortunately, what you've seen too much of everywhere, including here, out in front of the Whaling Museum is a great example where we literally just yanked the wrought iron grate Friday or Monday because it's left in place for too long. It's girdling the tree now. So that's another piece of this in the long-term maintenance of the tree systems is to make sure whatever is in place that's appropriate for that day is then revisited to
In
make
that
sure
year,
that,
because
long term it may not be the best solution. But I like the idea of being flexible where we have a tree root that's coming across a sidewalk per se and may have already separated the stone features. If we can bridge the gap with a feature like you described that's in keeping with the same materials already in place around town, then we might be able to achieve both goals.
Right, because most of the houses, or a lot of the houses going up Main Street specifically have got wrought iron on the fence in the back at the greenhouse. It's not a feature that is unheard of on that, because in the old days, it was considered that you were wealthy if you had that. And the picket fence, you were poorer if you had that. But
How about no fence?
but maybe think about just in some of the trees, a fence that went around that was high enough that you wouldn't trip on. You could remove it if it got to be too small,
Yep.
and it would work. Perhaps with less money than trying to hide the roots.
Yeah, we could definitely take a look at that.
I just want to speak to the sidewalks needing to be flat. The reason it has to be flat is the rules under the ADA are very restrictive on slopes. If an area does not comply with these rules, you can be subject to a $1,000 a day fine until you bring that area into
I
compliance.
didn't mean that it had to not tilt, because I know it has to tilt.
Yep.
I just meant that if they weren't all absolutely
Straight.
Yep.
straight,
Yeah.
and sometimes you had a little rise and it went on.
So we still expect the surface to sort of, it still needs to respect the fixed features out there. And so we have fixed features such as driveways, such as
Stairs.
fence openings, gates into the rear of
Yeah.
the properties,
Stairs.
stairways. So those things are really, really sensitive points that we're, in some cases, if we're looking to dramatically affect the front entrances, for instance, we would really have to approach each homeowner to have discussions of what level of, or how severe they would allow that to occur in the front. Again, if you go back out, and I'm happy to do, there will be some site walks in future sessions to take a look at some of the details and features. And certainly if you're a homeowner present, I extend meeting individually to look at your specific frontage, to find what we envision together, to come to a good conclusion. But I think if we're thinking about raising the materials up, improving the foundation, and putting them back, I think what you'll find in the end is the entire area is going to be brought up slightly to accommodate all the mature roots. That's
Right, well,
really
I
what it
think-
comes down to.
The most important thing probably from the tourist standing down on Lower Main is looking up Main Street and seeing that it looks the way it's been pictured. And I think if you have to raise the sidewalk to protect the trees or whatever, it's not a bad thing, because unless you were there with your ruler, you would not,
Wouldn't notice.
you wouldn't notice it. I think that that the inhabitants along that street you will hear more from.
Kevin's already reached out.
I have a comment.
Yes.
Thank you. My name is John McLaughlin. I'm very fortunate. I was born and raised on the island, and I have some comments about the project. I've watched everything's been going on for the last couple of years here. One question I have, which a lot of people have asked me, and I cannot answer. They took a lot of the old rounded curbs out and put in this new type of squared block, whatever they are, with the sharp edges, all right? They put them in down there all through the lower Main Street. And what happened to the ones they took out?
It's a great question. A lot of the materials are stockpiled. We have some bluestone that's been recovered from out in front of the club car area. There's some gaps in the bluestone up in front of, in the area, I want to say off the top of my head, around 88, 89, 90, thereabouts on Main Street, that we intend to reuse that recovered stone from.
Okay, I would like to continue. I think you ought to take whatever they take out and stockpile them and put them back in the downtown area, in the core area, before they start using this new stuff. You know, it's outlandish. It's not Nantucket style, and I'll say that I don't want to forget my train of thought. I'm well over 80 years of age, and I'm proud to be a Nantucketer, and I'm proud that I have just passed 50 odd years on the Historic
of
Commission.
The HDC.
I hope to do some more, but anyway, there are only two catch basins between the bank and the monument in the midsection. It's right there at where the coffin school is. And so the water, whenever it comes down, the heavy rains, it coagulates there, it fills the drains, it goes in the guy's yard. You know? And I find some of that around a lot. All right. I was hired by the DPW after I retired 20 years ago from the steamship, and they hired me to do a survey of the island on a lot of things. And there are everywhere. There's 4,000 catch basins on the island. There's all the stuff, you know. It was surveyed. I gave it to the DPW. I had copies of it. They lost their copy. So they came looking for the second ones. You know, I give them to them. So they came for the third time. I said, "You're not getting a third copy. I haven't got it yet." But anyway, I'm very hard-nosed on Nantucket. Maybe that's why I get reelected all the time. I don't know. But I enjoy my relationship with the public and let them know. I tell things like they are, and that's the way it is. But the other thing, the curbs, and they put in their bulkhead on Easy Street. I don't know why. Because you're supposed to stop the water from coming up in the streets. So it's only so wide, the water goes around the side when the tide comes in. You know, things like that are happening, that there'd be more eyes on what's going on and more presentation to the public, like this, or in the newspaper. What's going on this week with this, and whatever you wrote on this piece of paper. It should be, every 2 weeks, it should be a report, maybe. Let the public know. They sit around asking questions, nobody's got the answers. Thank you.
Thank you, John.
The goal when we are constructing is
Sorry?
what, the goal when we are constructing is whatever is in front of the house, the business, goes back. We wanna put exactly what was there back, so that we're not making change. Sometimes that use what's out there.
On that
Right,
note,
if you two want any questions, ask me about
but,
Nantucket. Thank you.
Thank you.
sorry, John, that what you were talking about, the curb in front of the club cart, it's so sharp because it's new. Is there any way to go back and somehow make that a softer edge, or is that?
I would have it over time. I think it would look stranger because you'd have to cut it with a saw.
But
It would
the-
look,
Our original curbstones were hand, or it looked like it was hand done.
It's all split.
yeah.
When they put in new curbstones out at the airport, which they did, I don't know, 8 years ago or so, they used the sharp corners, and there must have been 20 cars a day that had their tires flattened because they ran into them. They were used to the
Sure.
Yep.
the old ones they give. Can't you buy the ones that?
They don't manufacture the rounded curb.
So the new stuff is, let's say, it's the newer version of the manufactured, they're still mining granite. So they're just doing it in a different manner
The
today
cutting's more precise
than
now.
they were years ago. But back to your point, that, the area along the club car is, as you know, it's a taxi stand.
I know.
So the good news is, the people that are using that specific area are well aware. You don't have a lot of the traveling public that's riding up and subject to slashing tires on that. In other areas where it's very high traffic, where we have supplemented, you don't have to keep your hand up, you'll definitely be the next question. Down Straight Wharf at New Whale, right at the High Line.
Yep.
Those areas have specifically been softened, where the curb is, the gutter is very, very limited. So that we recognize that when wheels are on a very narrow surface, are expected to make contact, we're trying to limit or minimize in the areas specifically that we use any new materials.
Right. It's just ginger.
So are you telling me that the curbs that were in front of the club car and the Pacific Club on the south side were destroyed in taking them up? Because the current sidewalk, those curbs are lower than the old curbs were, those 8x8s or whatever they were, and that they were too shallow to put back?
So right now, the stuff that was taken out of there is, the comparison I can tell you is the new stone would be something that is basically the depth of this paper, about 18 inches. And the blue stone that was coming out was even less than.
It wasn't bluestone, it was brick.
Brick?
There was a brick sidewalk next to the Pacific Club. Is that set in concrete now?
It is set in concrete, yes.
Are you aware that there's very high groundwater in that area and that it's subject to periodic inundations?
It gets flooded all the time. Very, very aware of that.
Well,
And the good news.
I would like to see the old granite curbs that used to be in front of the Pacific Club. And I'm a shareholder, I'm also an officer of the Pacific Club. And I don't get the mail, so I don't know if we were notified that this work was going on. I think that may affect us as to the monuments of where those curbs actually were. If you look in front of Mitchell's, there's one of the old curbs is actually built into the sidewalk, so you can see where it was. These are historic monuments. They affect our ground cover. They affect our property. Now,
No, I will say that no property monuments have been disturbed.
to go back to what you're calling flagstone at 86 Main, that was bluestone. They put that down, that was a sign of wealth in front of a homeowner's house. So if it was, I don't care if they're two different materials next to each other, The bluestone was a sign that this was an important person's house. And as far as Pleasant Street has caused a lot of problems since when it was last resurfaced. It was graded 2 or 3 inches, maybe 3 inches too deep, which is why those roots come out into the street. So Pleasant Street was dropped when it shouldn't have been, when they resurfaced it. I don't remember when, it was quite a few years ago. But, you know, the Main Street of 1977, I think that was the last time it was done. It doesn't seem all that long ago to me. I'm not as old as John, but like him, I'm a Nantucketer, and the historic character of the town means a lot to me.
Sure.
This is Virginia Andrews. Her father and her uncle and her mother are all.
Don't forget my grandparents, my aunt, we all know.
We all know.
I try not to succumb to the local sense of entitlement, which is equally a problem, I think, sometimes to the off-island sense of entitlement. So,
I would say as a visitor, I am humbled by the history, and I am very much interested in being a part of something that is truly an improvement and not something that is a detriment to the historical character of not just this important corridor in Upper Main Street, but really all of the core and all of the town. And frankly, I'm no one to come in and say what should happen. That's why I'm seeking input from people that are interested in sharing that history and sharing what they care about.
well, one of the things that I noticed that's of concern to me about granted the sidewalk next to the Pacific Club was too narrow for the functions with the cabs that go on. But narrowing the street there does create a problem because there's often a delivery truck on the other side. There's cabs parked next to the club. There's delivery trucks right across in front of on the corner there, just as you go up. You've narrowed the street, you've got the tire biter curbs, and God forbid we have to get a fire engine in there when they're delivering things anyway, and it takes 45 minutes to get into town from, Amelia Drive. It's just
So there's a lot of
there's more than one safety concern that you have to think about.
there's a lot more happening that's planned in and around the Pacific Club and opposite on that other side where the deliveries occur currently. It will get narrower than what's there now. And that big space that's out there that people congregate outside the Pacific Club before they cross in either direction there is intended on the plans that were developed before I came as a large sidewalk area, a bricked sidewalk. So it would have the through lane and the right lane to go up Main Street, and the remainder, it will be completely sidewalk. So a big bulb of brick right outside the Pacific Club to be able to handle the pedestrian congregation in that corner.
You're saying the sidewalk's gonna get wider yet?
In
I
that,
was- you're
not
talking
at the
about
cab stand. I'm talking about
The
when you're,
west side,
up on South Water,
So
South Water.
or is it North Water?
I'm equally
South Water.
concerned about,
It's Main Street. You're talking
It's a
about
Main Street
where,
corner.
where the water fountain is and all that?
Just below there, yes.
I'm
West
equally
side.
concerned
That's
about
west.
what's been happening around Strait Wharf and the Pacific Club. And I'm very surprised to hear that shareholders of the Pacific Club were not noticed and given a chance to provide feedback. I'm very appreciative that as a resident of Main Street, I have the opportunity to provide feedback here today. And I recognize that you're saying that what's happened downtown is really a different project, and we will be treated very differently on Main Street. But I think as much as we'd like to decouple these two projects, we have to recognize that confidence in the decisions and a precedent for the way the design is being determined and the design that is being implemented is being demonstrated to us by seeing what is happening down at the waterfront area. I have really specific questions about this section from Winter Street to Pleasant Street.
Could I just we have your name?
Yes, I'm Hillary Rayport and I'm a resident on this section
Hillary
of Main Street, yes.
Redford?
Rayport.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah. Are you intending to use tactile brick on this section of Main Street?
So this section that's an excellent question. Right now, we have been introducing tactile, so it's the dimpled brick. It's the brick that it's the same manufacturer of the brick that we're using, have used for decades here in town, and we're continuing to use for repairs and for any new construction. They now make a handicap accessible dimpled brick. We have been using them downtown for the tactile panels. The intent certainly would be to introduce those as part of the ADA improvements to any ramp systems that go in. But I also have only been here a short time, but I have been paying attention. And the one thing that struck me, I think, most was the story about the state project at the Rotary. And when the Rotary project occurred last, and the state required all of their big flashy signs to be installed, the town willingly complied until the inspector checked off and said everything's fine, and as soon as he got on a boat, Public Works came around and put up the proper signs, took down the old signs, or the brand new state signs. So I guess my point would be, back to Jim's earlier comment about reported violations and being responsive to the state Architectural Access Board. DPW works in concert with the local Commission on Disabilities to really make market improvements where possible. And one thing that has been discussed, and whether or not it comes to bear or not, if the tactile panels are installed with the dimpled bricks, they could certainly revert to the standard brick without the truncated domes on them as a potential compromise. I'm just talking physically as opposed to, but I will say, regardless of any of that, without a waiver of some sort from the state board, it literally would take a phone call for someone to complain to have it revert back.
So I very much appreciate you pointing out that there is a process to seek waivers, and you referenced it earlier, because the sidewalk in certain places, I'm thinking specifically as one approaches the Pacific Bank headed down Main Street on the south side of the street, there are very large elm trees and the sidewalk is too narrow. It will never be ADA compliant unless you take down the tree. And you've said that you're not going to take down trees. So we're recognizing now that actually, even though we say, oh, we have to do this because of ADA, and I do want to preface, I live in a multi-generational home. I push a stroller. I have a 95-year-old mother-in-law who lives with us and walks with a walker. I am very interested in accessibility, and I think it's very important that we fix the sidewalks and we make them more accessible for people with limited mobility. That being said, if we are saying that there is a bottleneck and it's 2 feet wide and that pathway is not going to be ADA compliant, we are really wasting our time talking about other undesirable accommodations. And that's why the waiver process exists. So I think it's important that we recognize that this cry about, oh, it has to be ADA and it's all, mandated and we have no flexibility is really false.
No, and I wouldn't say that we're crying that there's no flexibility. What I'm saying is the process that exists requires us to show, the physical measurements. So Jim can speak to that. He's the one who's been doing this work for us, and on the, specific to the Upper Main Street piece. And, from what I'm told, there's at least 3 waiver requests, that would be moving forward.
There'll be several. One of them will be because of pinch points under 3 feet at the trees. Another one will be anytime you're crossing over any of the side streets, those require pedestrian ramps. And because of the sidewalks being much higher than the roadway, you're just not gonna make the slope requirements to get that. Another waiver is gonna be needed because we're reusing all of that flagstone, the slab stone that's out there. Those stones just aren't perfect. They have dips and divots, so you're never gonna get that perfectly level how they want it. So we haven't actually started preparing the variances. We've just kind of went out there, we've taken some measurements, and we've identified some areas that are gonna need variances. Just because you apply for a variance doesn't guarantee
Right.
you'll get one.
Well, it really helps that the person who grants the variances has spent substantial amount of time on it.
Yes, Tom's a great guy. He's
And if you
reasonable.
need a backup on any of those, you can get in touch with John, because we also do requests for variances where it's a historic,
Yep, they definitely,
The most recent one actually was at the club car.
yeah,
There was a waiver compromise, with the brand new accessible access to the side of the club car on the Easy Street side.
right.
And it actually was, it was interesting how things work here. But I was in Boston for a training, stopped in to see Mr. Hopkins, who's the ADA coordinator in Boston at the state level. And he made me aware that Club Car was starting construction. Just so happened that we were working on the opposite corner, so we were able to reach out to and coordinate with the owner, so that they knew and we knew ultimately where the ramp system was coming down to. So the point was coordination through this, whether you're an owner or permitting board, is extremely helpful through this process, because had we not known or worked with the board at the state level to find out and to determine exactly what was being proposed there, it's very likely that that ramp would have had to be reconstructed only within 6 months of its original construction to meet our newly constructed sidewalk along that stretch of lower Main Street.
Right.
So it was great that we worked together on it, and we got it right the first time, so that the ramp now blends right into the sidewalk landing now.
I think, which is hard to get everybody to do here perhaps, that if the boards work together and not get surprised about what another board has said, it makes the work flow better and the results are better. So we appreciate you being available to work with us, and we with you. It will help. It's going to be a long project. And one thing I just want to throw in, that intersection down by the Pacific Club, when that was laid, it was laid by some Portuguese men who knew how to do it. They did a magnificent job. It's still there, and it takes the most traffic of any place in the area. And I don't think that Vincent, it was before he did that much work here.
I could say the folks that he's employed to do the large portion of cobblestone reconstruction work are, if not the same folks that
Maybe
were
they're
here.
the same ones, because they did
They are.
India Street too.
This is a Portuguese group out of New Bedford.
Right, and they are
They're
great.
fantastic.
Yeah,
They're fantastic. So it's nice, and I think that's another big point, and I'm glad you brought that up, Diane, because we do have the expertise from the folks that have been doing this work here on Island for many, many years.
right.
Is this Victor's group?
It's not Victor's employees per se, but it's
It's
a
subcontractors.
subcontractor.
Yeah, because Main Street used to be beautiful from the work that was done in the late 70s. It was a perfectly curved street bed. And I can tell you the traffic used to go a lot faster than it does now, which is really the only benefit that we've had from the degradation of the street. When they put those cobbles back together after 2009, when they ripped everything up, and when they did it again in 2013, that crew did a terrible job. And I think that is why the street is in terrible condition right now. So
And you speak to a larger issue about road openings, permitting through the DPW and follow-up.
well, really, I'm talking about the quality of the repair.
I
mean, the
understand
road
that.
openings are
Yeah.
necessary, but it needs to be put back in the condition that it was
That's
put
right.
in.
And so I know for a fact that Johnny and his crew will be the first to tell you that they did not do that work. And it's funny because it does come up. It's not funny if you
At
live
least
there.
once a week.
But it does come up because people will point to that long utility project that went up Main Street and what happened to Main Street thereafter. And so I am very cognizant of repair work, and utilities are happening and will continue to happen regardless of, how new that's been new installed, whether the house is, restored or changed or added onto. Materials change, and those things will continue to need to be brought up. And I would say that the nice thing is that new construction and the advent of new technologies is in some cases allowing construction to occur without surface disruption. Pulling pipes through old pipes, for instance, and there's other things that can be done for utilities, but in the end, it comes back to proper restoration for existing streets, and you're not going to find someone that's more interested in making sure that that happens than me.
I just wanted to emphasize that, as a preservationist, we have found over the years that traditional building methods are really the best. They did it for a certain reason. So, rebuilding the street as much as possible using traditional methods is probably the best way. It's been that way since the 1830s. The other thing I did want to point out, I know that you were talking about the crosswalks that are, they're not to code, but the one thing I was walking up the other day and I realized that they really are character defining of the street. And even though they might not be to code, is it possible to keep those walkways as historic elements and still add appropriate crosswalks? So, because I do think they are character defining, and that's one thing that really makes it unique. It's not just cobblestones; it's all those variety of materials.
I will say that many of those crosswalks on Main Street that you're talking about, they're mid-block. They're not at the intersection. Right. Those are very dangerous. Cars don't expect to see a pedestrian in the middle of the road. Where you're pulling up into an intersection, you're slowing down to go onto that main street. But
I think it's definitely a point worth bringing to the state because it's probably not the first or only situation they've come across like that. Right. It's an excellent point. I think one of the challenges, besides just being mid-block and non-standard, is the fact that they don't return into a current ramp system. Right. And frankly, there's at least one that I know of that lands on a driveway, as we discussed. And so that, I know by code is not allowed. If there are situations where the state would allow them to remain in place, even if they serve no formal crossing function, but are left in place because when you look up Main Street, it didn't change the look that was described earlier. I did pick up on that, so we will ask about that.
I was going to sort of reframe that, is that it's more about texture rather than them being utilized as a crosswalk.
Exactly.
And that when you talk about there being 6 and being replaced with 2, and having parking where those are, if it's just a texture thing that stays there but isn't, there aren't the curb cuts or the ramps or the but that it just remains
Sure.
as part of
Yep.
the history.
And trust me, when I'm saying 6 to 2, I'm cringing over here, knowing that it's definitely material that's now deleted from the landscape. You know, and I think that's, it's a very solid point.
The one thing that I've just to follow up on that, I've noticed that most visitors don't know what they are. They don't realize that they're crosswalks.
People
And
don't
the
use
people
them.
who use them are the locals, you
Yeah.
know,
Exactly.
who are looking,
You know,
I will say, and I'm not sure, sorry to jump in, I'm not sure if it's your mother-in-law, Hillary, but I have been contacted by someone in that area around that age who has said, could you please remove and replace the old granite crosswalk right behind the bank on, the upper section of, to that beautiful new brick surface that you've done, and I've enjoyed down on, South Beach Street.
I know who you mean.
So
It's not her mother-in-law.
Well, it's clear that proper crosswalks are necessary,
Sure.
but I just want to second what Michael and Michael's neighbor said about the beauty of these stone slab crosswalks. And I think we, as stewards of this place, I think we have to ask ourselves, like, why are those crosswalks there? And they're there because the people who built these houses all knew each other and they wanted to visit each other. When our house was restored, we found a buried stone of the similar type in between the two neighboring houses because they were friends and they went back and forth. And so I just think it's a fingerprint from the past that tells us something about the people that lived on the street, and it would really be a shame if they went away. I'd like them to remain as a decorative historic element without a curb cut and also without a parking ban. I mean, right now they're marked crosswalks, do not park. They don't have to remain marked that way.
People still park on them.
Yeah, exactly. It's a revenue loss, but it wouldn't be a parking loss.
In keeping with this question that Michael and Hillary are talking about in terms of retaining these not crosswalks, these granite crosswalks, the question are, when you're asking for a waiver, are you also asking for a waiver for the granite hand-carved downspouts that interrupt in certain places, which clearly...
We're going to have to, because it'll be it's kind of like a hole in the surface, so it's not really continuous. You're gonna have a little scoop through there, so that's definitely on the waiver process.
So when you list out your waivers,
Yes.
that will be one?
Yep.
Thank you.
That is, that's something we definitely will address. The intention is to obviously put those back. Those shouldn't be taken out.
That's the drain
Yes.
from the thing. Maybe that's why they created those
Yeah.
looking like crosswalks, because there wasn't anybody to tell them what to do. They just did what fit in to that house or the next house they just
Well,
built.
the slab stone is certainly easier to traverse than the cobble surface. It tends to be a bit smoother, I think.
Right.
And so it served the purpose for people who had the ability to,
As long as there's a functioning ramp system, I don't think there's any reason that the state would mind if there was extra crossings there.
Does this, this is just a question, I don't know. Does it help if there's community support for a waiver? I mean, if a group of
The
citizens
board
get
board
together-
meets and they decide, basically. You make the best argument you can.
Michael, just to reinforce that, everything that you've requested a waiver for goes through the local commission on disability,
Correct.
which I'm the chairman of.
Yep.
So everything goes through us. They don't always do what we recommend.
Yep.
But they
Oh, yeah.
usually do.
Yep.
They do like local input. So I think that when we make our recommendation, we'll be kind of leaning on this side anyway.
They definitely take into consideration historic districts too. That weighs heavily in their decision.
One more thing about the crosswalks. Anytime you have an uninterrupted stretch of pavement, even if it's cobblestone pavement, a driver is encouraged to speed up. And so retaining the crosswalks, interrupting the perception of the driver is a slowing factor.
So just to follow up on that, I think there is in addition to the texture, it's a quieting, it's a rhythm, and it's a quieting element for the traffic. The other thing, I was just kind of curious, Rob, the test plots you're going to do, you think you're going to do two or more different types of cobble. I'm just wondering, you know, I know these are isolated, so they're not like a street system, so you're not gonna be able to see perhaps the full effects of drainage and runoff versus settling in water. So it's gonna be a somewhat limited, uh, the result is gonna be somewhat limited in the overall benefit of analysis. But having said that, I'm kind of curious, are you planning on doing a traditional build? Are Portuguese, New Bedford builders next to these so that we can see 1, 2, 3, how they respond to the same traffic weight, the same rain, the
Yes.
same weathering effects?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And turning vehicles,
I just wanna add, I've
wheels,
seen,
twisting the stones.
I've seen our success with using asphalt and concrete
Yeah.
underneath thin stone dust with Belgian blocks. I've seen it in Portland, Maine, around the old port, been successful there, and around the Naval Yard in Boston where the Constitution is.
Well, the follow-up for me is that, I think the traditional method that Michael mentioned it's been around for a long time and it's proven successful. My concern more, from the capital side and the infrastructure is, as Rob has articulated, I think very well, that, you know, what goes in, there's a capacity issue, a deliverability issue, but then when we need to do work, we've magnified that dramatically by having, if we have to cut out and remove concrete, even if we did it in a panelization system, there's a magnitude, maybe an order of magnitude more work involved. So that's the reason I was curious.
Can I follow up again on that? So how will these test sites measure the survivability of old trees in this setting? One, how is it gonna test the weight and impact on historic homes? I think it was a gentleman over here who mentioned that their house feels like it's falling down. How can you actually test that in a test situation when none of those things are true? You know, you don't have an old tree that you're going to watch for 2 years, and you don't have an old structure that you can see, you know, whether it's moving more or less. And so I can appreciate the value of a test site for some things, but not things that are been talked about a lot here, like trees.
Sure.
And that this is the
Sure.
historic.
Sure, so there's, other than doing a in-place test site, and frankly, I don't want to test a spot where I feel like I'm going to kill a mature tree, or leave it up to preserving a tree on a case-by-case by constructing appropriately around them and respecting the root systems as best we can, and trimming wherever were only necessary. But then also, it's been described many different, by various people I've spoken to, about how to then pack around the cut to treat it properly and to let it heal and continue to be healthy. So I think there's plenty in the works to preserve what we have and to only enhance that by identifying additional areas to continue to plant. And maybe identify areas that can that exist currently that could be enhanced by adjusting the curb lines, such as those areas opposite 98 where they have the rounded stones. But to the test sections, it'll be specifically for the structural capacity and the ability to withstand continued loaded trucks and just regular volume traffic.
Well, you have the weight of the trucks, number one, to copy what might be on the street. You have electronic equipment now, which can go down or be used as to see how much your roadway is moving, you know, whether it's out or in, which will be a plus, because you'll be able to know how it's reacting to the trucks going over it. I think
Sure.
that it's a very good solution to what we haven't had before.
One last thing, I know I've definitely heard some comments about not just the constructability and the expertise necessary to install this stuff, but back to sort of the textures and the look. And I can't say that you can look up Main Street right now and have it look identically to the pictures in the book, or the pictures you may have in your homes or available through NHA. It's similar. It looks differently if you really look at the details. You see the tree roots that have disrupted the curb lines and such. And those are going to, I'll say the word corrected, but we're not here to make it look pristine and perfect like Disneyland. What we're trying to do is what we've talked about tonight. And so in the end, the surface is intended to try to keep as best and as long as we can with these improved foundation materials that we're bringing in and the techniques that we've been using downtown, for instance. Native materials, it's just applying them differently. And so if you walk South Beach Street, for instance, and that's now been in service almost a year, it doesn't look perfect. It doesn't look perfect at all, at least to my eye. We've gone over and put additional layers of stone dust into those because the new stuff settles with rain and with use over time. So this is still, even when we have the contractor drive away, when they're done, that's when we start operating and maintaining those surfaces from that day forward, going back and doing treatments of stone dust or whatever's appropriate to continue to have those surfaces stay.
Well, I don't think anybody wants you to keep it looking absolutely perfect, because this is one of the things is, it is a working historic town.
Sure.
And that's, if the street or the cobbles get a little, wibbly wobbly or whatever, it's not to be unexpected. We would hate to have it, at least most people who live here for any length of time would hate to see it absolutely perfect.
I agree.
I'd just like to visit the places that you mentioned where these materials have been used successfully. Could you be a little more specific?
I would have to go back to my office and give me an email or a phone number.
Sure.
I can certainly call you.
What's your email?
My email is James .Rivard, which is RIVARD @stantec.com.
Okay, thanks.
Is that you talking Portland?
Yeah.
So I know that the Constitution at the
Navy Yard.
Charlestown Navy Yard.
With the iron sided, I can get you an address in the old port in Portland.
That section there is Belgian block on stone dust on concrete. The Charlestown
Sooner or
Navy
later,
Yard.
on Nantucket, sooner or later, under the concrete, there is sand. It's 600 feet to bedrock.
Sure.
That's not true in Maine, I know. And my point about the Pacific Club and the concrete sidewalks down there on the water is that, with the fluctuating groundwater levels, concrete becomes basically a boat. That's why we have the problems we have. So, it's good. Concrete, the specific gravity of concrete is not that much different than water, which is one of the reasons that the railroad ties as mitigation for a SBPF project ultimately didn't fly, so to speak.
I just want to add, anytime when we're constructing sidewalks or the roadway, anytime we come and encounter any kind of tree root system, I call Dale, the town arborist. He's out within 5-10 minutes and he directs us what to do. Whether he can trim it, which is very rare, or we have to change what our design is and go up over it. Move back 30-40 feet on either side so that we can raise up and get over the tree root. So anytime I see a root, I call Dale and Dale tells me what to do. So
And he knows.
yeah, and he does know what he's doing.
And as we've been touching these, and as you've seen the trees that are worked around, the new boxes are built around them. We're bringing in, once the stone dust is cleared away, we're bringing in organic material to
On size of the tree pit openings. So he really, anything around a tree, we just do whatever he tells us.
Well, it seems that you have been very willing to attack and approach, many concerns. You will have, I'm sure, more as the audience changes. But I thank you for this meeting tonight. it was important. It has changed my mind a lot. I don't think, oh, he's the guy who was gonna pave Main Street.
Thank you, Diane. I definitely want to thank you, everyone, for coming again. And before we do go for the night, there's some folks that are here that have not spoken. Not to say that you must, but it would be great if you do have something to say that you share it with us. And if you're here just to listen, thank you again. And we will have some continued discussions. I will say we are definitely looking for some. We've gotten lots of reactions, and we have. It's actually a project it's fascinating for me because we've gotten so many more reactions than I expected without actually having taken any actions yet. So that really helped put a fine point on the fact that doing public information sessions and seeking input on this specific project was more important than really anything we've done before. And so this process really begins and ends with you and your neighbors and other interested parties. So thank you so much for participating and taking important time out of your schedule to do that. That said, it is really our goal to get this demonstration project, the 86-88 sidewalk stretch, completed before summer, so that the folks that are here for season in that area and all of us that are here around the clock can really take a look and then and provide feedback and go from there. We'll continue to build on this. Again, Rome was not built in a day. We're not going to reconstruct Nantucket overnight. No one would want that. So it's going to take some time, and we're going to learn things along the way. Jim will tell you firsthand, every time we come to work in the morning, we're not quite sure. We have a full expectation of what we're going to encounter, and boy, every day is different. So
It's not boring.
there's a lot to do. Even going out with a well-thought-through and well-conceived plan, but plans change when construction happens. So we want to make sure that when and if changes need to occur due to unforeseen, unforecasted conditions, which we have already fully vetted, then we're able to make a solid decision in the field that's in line with
I know we're being very positive, and you say Rome wasn't built in a day. I just want to register that I am very upset about what's been done at the waterfront. I think it's really unattractive. I think it's really ahistoric. And I think if it had been done through the Historic District Commission, you wouldn't be saying, oh, this was a lesson learned about the flagstone. You'd actually have to fix it. And the plan would have been approved.
The plan was set up, just not followed.
So a plan was set up and it wasn't followed, and now you've gotten feedback that it's not good, and I think it should be fixed. And I think the new work done on the intersection of Easy Street and Main Street, who designed it? Did the Department of Public Works design it?
It was a plan that was given to me.
No, that was a design that was done with a previous sidewalk committee and engineering firm probably 5 years ago. So, like I said, there's lots of plans that have already been drafted for the majority of the core, including, as I mentioned, the bulb of brick sidewalk out in front of the Pacific Club. Again, this is the Upper Main Street focus, and I appreciate where you said earlier. I'm going to revisit my schedule for the winter because there is a session planned to talk specifically about the downtown sidewalks. Downtown sidewalk improvements public information session is scheduled for Thursday, March 21st. I know from some of the folks that are in the seats here tonight that participated around this time last year when we were contemplating reconstruction following the sewer force main failure on South Beach Street, Lower Broad, Easy Street, Straight Wharf, and all of that. All those plans were presented and were vetted. And frankly, we had lots of business owners and residents who were tasked with doing their own design here at a workshop, and then bouncing that off of what the engineers had come up with. And it was actually fantastic to see that a lot of the same conclusions were drawn.
I understand that you're listening and you're taking feedback, and you have a wonderful reputation for that, and I appreciate that. I think as far as the Upper Main Street project goes, there is a lane that you could drive a Mack truck through in terms of what we are being told will happen and what we may ultimately end up with. I don't know if there's documentation of existing conditions. When things change, they will just be changed. It's, as a resident, as someone with a major investment on Main Street, when I hear things like, well, why did we get rid of, someone asked a question, why did we get rid of the beautiful, rounded, hand-hewn, antique curbs outside the Pacific Club? And the answer is, well, they weren't tall enough. My question is, well, why wasn't the sidewalk made lower? You know, or they broke when, so I just think I'm glad there will continue to be meetings. I think things need to be documented, and I think hopefully you understand how much it matters to the people.
I definitely understand how much it matters, and I will say that while comments have been made, and you're hearing for the first time, you know, why something was done, there's also a lot of other thing that's going into that. And I would say first and foremost, understanding that Upper Main Street was specifically identified as, let's say, more important than Lower Main Street. I would say that harvesting traditional materials that we are not able to manufacture or get our hands on from a portion of Main Street to insert up to a specific area on Upper Main Street that had sustained damage sometime in the past and been restored with non-historic materials was the goal.
So the curbs were harvested and replaced with new curbs because they were needed in a different area?
Correct.
Well, I don't think that Upper Main Street is more important than the Pacific Club. I think the Pacific Club is enormously important.
Well, I'm not here to decide which horse wins.
Who
No,
does
and you
decide?
shouldn't be.
I mean, I guess that's my only thing was like, will the HDC be consulted or have some say in anything in the old historic district? I mean, or is it just, I mean, who has the final say? I guess I don't really understand how the whole process works. Is it the DPW will have the final thing, or is it the select board, or, no, I didn't know.
I would say like any good process, so there's a department head that makes decisions, and there's a board that I'm interested in making sure that we minimize or eliminate overall concerns or questions in the end. You know, we go forward with something that we can all get behind, including looking at specific frontages, which I have with lots of residents to determine what's best for their specific frontage. And there are certainly cases where we would do things differently next time. We still get positive feedback for the improvements that have been made. So I think it's complex. It's not a very simple answer. And I'm available. Continue the feedback.
This is not reassuring.
Well, it's this sausage is delicious, but it's not.
But I
it's
wouldn't
not
want
easy
to be
to
one.
make.
Okay, never mind.
The other thing is, I think we need to say it has, over the years, the HDC has guided certain aspects of the roads, driveways, sidewalks. On occasion, there has been a board of selectmen that have, and it has gone, somebody didn't like what we decided, and it has gone to the Board of Selectmen. The Board of Selectmen has upheld, well, it was gone back to us, went back. It was Martin's Lane. I don't know whether you all know Martin's Lane, it's the oldest street, and somebody wanted a curb cut. It was not something that we wanted to have. There were no curb cuts. It's a strange street with different height curbs and all the rest of it, and it never had one. We denied it. It went to the Board of Selectmen and they sent it back to us. We denied it again. It went up there. They finally decided to let them have the curb cut. That was not
The
something.
Board of Selectmen?
Yes.
Well, it was ordered by court.
Yes.
And they decided not to appeal, but they continued, I mean,
But it was, the curb cut was made.
yes.
We said no. But sometimes, even if you say no and whatever, the judge who did that had very little knowledge of Nantucket to begin with. This particular issue is under discussion at the moment. Is how much control the HDC has and how much goes by the board. And the things that the HCC has always considered as part of their things are the street lights, bicycle racks, the wrought iron fences are all considered part of something that we do, house by house on the fences and stuff. The town wanted to put up some sort of weird looking street lights. We changed that. They upheld us, but this was back further. And I think that was considered, I was a selectman in, about 100 years ago, 1979, 1980 and 81.
So we currently have two styles of decorative street lamps.
Right.
Right, and those are very specifically applied to where they go. There's lots of, this is a great example, I would say, of the interaction between the HTC and the Public Works Department, or the town, if you want to call it that, on a project with this level of sensitivity. And we continue to wrestle with bike racks. You go around town, I would love to have a uniform style bike
So
rack.
would we.
But no
and
one,
rubbish barrels. Can you believe
However-
the fight we've had over rubbish barrels?
however, there's lots of people who would say, no, we don't want uniformity. The uniqueness of this neighborhood or that neighborhood, we want this style or that style. And so I get it. And we have to have discussions to what is best suited for when we spend the public tax dollar.
Right, instead of finding ones that are painted bright blue and circular in the middle of Main Street going up. One thing I wanted to mention just quickly, because then I need to go, my ride is here. On that corner in front of the Pacific Club, in the summertime, it's a horror show because the UPS truck is always over in front of Zero Main. The taxi cabs, of which I am an owner, so I know what the problems are over here. And the pedestrians are here, and the police are regulating where the cars go, whether they go to the right and in the right straight ahead or sort of straight ahead. If the police regulated the people, the pedestrians, you wouldn't have the problem. If you held up the pedestrian so the car could go and know where he was going to go, it would be one thing rather than hold up the cars and let pedestrians walk all over. There's that crosswalk in front of Nobby's, and the rest is sort of, and then the one going from the Pacific Club over to Zero Main, but the rest of it is sort of,
I would say you're describing what I discovered when I first arrived. I came east, but I felt like I was in the Wild West.
Yeah.
So I think what I think would be very helpful is to share with the HDC now the plans that have already been developed, the conceptual plans for the sidewalk improvements for the core, for the downtown, so that between now and the March 22nd session,
Right.
back here, could be far more productive. And any concerns or ideas and those sort of things could come to bear well before the improvements are really brought to bear.
Right, and there are lots of things that happen that are a reason, like the traffic, whether they're regulating cars or people,
Sure.
that would help you, that you might not know about, not, having been there. But if you get hold of John Hedden,
Sure.
set it up, we would be more than
Sure.
happy to
And
work with you anytime.
Alan, you haven't said anything, and I hate to put you on the spot, but Alan Reinheld has been really instrumental in years past with the sidewalk committee, who has ultimately brought a lot of these projects to bear. In John's office, Mike Burns, the transportation planner, has been integral. He's not able to join us tonight, but he's been integral in helping bring these projects to design and to bear. So there's really, and that's just one of there's very, very many people in the community that have spent countless hours producing surveys on the streets, the sidewalks, to identify priority areas, to have discussions about things like the street furniture, the trees out there, and a lot of these same subjects. So we have trees, but we have limited street furniture in the Upper Main Street area.
Right.
But a lot of things that we need to work through, again, that don't apply in both areas, but there's still a lot of crossover. So we're happy to, but I'd like to have Alan just mention briefly before everyone runs out, a little bit of work that's been done back in the early 2000s.
We spent, this is the Roads and Right-of-Way Committee, we spent 3 years doing a downtown sidewalk survey. And what we did, we went down in the core district of downtown, and we went down street by street, number by number, and rated the condition of the sidewalk. We had a 5-point scale, and we had members of the committee literally up and down the street rating the sidewalk number by number on virtually every street in the downtown core district. And we compiled that data onto a spreadsheet, at which that information is currently available. And that was really the impetus to get the town to focus on the sidewalks, the condition of the sidewalks. Anyone who walks in town knows how lumpy these sidewalks are and how dangerous they can be. I've tripped myself, and that's really what began this project. So there's a lot of data out there about the sidewalks, and the overall aim, I think, of the project that Rob has undertaken now is to try and correct some of the more serious situations where the sidewalks were just really untenable. So that's, I think it's been a long time in coming, and I think that the work that has been done so far is really amazing. It's a vast improvement in terms of the public access and public safety. And these, I think, are the two main conditions that our committee was looking for in terms of the sidewalk. So
I'll just leave you with this. There is really nothing that can describe the satisfaction of a job well done than to encounter the Macy Warehouse's first wheelchair visitor. I can't even describe how excited this person was, who had been to town for a number of years and was never able to enter the building on his own. It was a special moment. So I look forward to continuing to listen and to bring these projects to bear. And again, I really appreciate everyone's involvement tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't know if you're interested, but this is